But what do you need him for? The guest paused ruefully for a long time and twitched, but finally spoke. You see, it's such a strange story. I'm sitting here for the same reason you are, namely, on account of Pontius Pilate. Here the guest looked around fearfully and said, the thing is that a year ago I wrote a novel about Pilate. You are a writer? The poet asked with interest. The guest's face darkened and he threatened Ivan with his fist, then said, I am a master. He grew stern and took from the pocket of his dressing gown a completely greasy black cap with the letter M embroidered on it in yellow silk. He put this cap on and showed himself to Ivan both in profile and full face, to prove that he was a master. She sewed it for me with her own hands, he added mysteriously. And what is your name? I no longer have a name, the strange guest answered with gloomy disdain. I renounced it, as I generally did everything in life. Let's forget it. Then at least tell me about the novel, Ivan asked delicately. If you please, sir. My life, it must be said, has taken a not very ordinary course, the guest began. A historian by education, he had worked until 2 years ago at one of the Moscow museums, and, besides that, had also done translations. From what languages? Ivan interrupted curiously. I know 5 languages besides my own, replied the guest, English, French, German, Latin, and Greek. Well, I can also read Italian a little. Oh, my! Ivan whispered enviously. The historian had lived solitarily, had no family anywhere and almost no acquaintances in Moscow. And, just think, one day he won 100,000 rubles. Imagine my astonishment, the guest in the black cap whispered, when I put my hand in the basket of dirty laundry and, lo and behold, it had the same number as in the newspaper. A state bond, he explained, they gave it to me at the museum. Having won 100,000 rubles, Ivan's mysterious guest acted thus, bought books, gave up his room on Myasnitskaya. Oh, that accursed hole! He growled. And rented from a builder, in a lane near the Arbat, 2 rooms in the basement of a little house in the garden. He left his work at the museum and began writing a novel about Pontius Pilate. Ah, that was a golden age. The narrator whispered, his eyes shining. A completely private little apartment, plus a front hall with a sink in it, he underscored for some reason with special pride, little windows just level with a paved walk leading from the gate. Opposite, only 4 steps away, near the fence, lilacs, a linden and a maple. Ah, ah, ah. In winter it was very seldom that I saw someone's black feet through my window and heard the snow crunching under them. And in my stove a fire was eternally blazing. But suddenly spring came and through the dim glass I saw lilac bushes, naked at first, then dressing themselves up in green. And it was then, last spring, that something happened far more delightful than getting 100,000 rubles. And that, you must agree, is a huge sum of money. That's true, acknowledged the attentively listening Ivan. I opened my little windows and sat in the second, quite minuscule room. The guest began measuring with his arms, here's the sofa, and another sofa opposite, and a little table between them, with a beautiful night lamp on it, and books nearer the window, and here a small writing table, and in the first room, a huge room, 150 square feet, books, and the stove. Ah, what furnishings I had! The extraordinary smell of the lilacs. And my head was getting light with fatigue, and Pilot was flying to the end. White mantle, red lining. I understand. Ivan exclaimed. Precisely so. Pilot was flying to the end, and I already knew that the last words of the novel would be, the 5th procurator of Judea, the equestrian Pontius Pilate. Well, naturally, I used to go out for a walk. 100,000 is a huge sum, and I had an excellent suit. Or I'd go and have dinner in some cheap restaurant. There was a wonderful restaurant on the Arbat, I don't know whether it exists now. Here the guest's eyes opened wide, and he went on whispering, gazing at the moon. She was carrying repulsive, alarming yellow flowers in her hand. Devil knows what they're called, but for some reason they're the first to appear in Moscow. And these flowers stood out clearly against her black spring coat. She was carrying yellow flowers. Not a nice color. She turned down a lane from Tverskaya and then looked back. Well, you know Tverskaya? Thousands of people were walking along Tverskaya, but I can assure you that she saw me alone, and looked not really alarmed, but even as if in pain. And I was struck not so much by her beauty as by an extraordinary loneliness in her eyes, such as no one had ever seen before. Obeying this yellow sign, I also turned down the lane and followed her. We walked along the crooked, boring lane silently, I on one side, she on the other. And, imagine, there was not a soul in the lane. I was suffering, because it seemed to me that it was necessary to speak to her, and I worried that I wouldn't utter a single word, and she would leave, and I'd never see her again.